Hi, this is Akshay, and today we will be discussing Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India 2018. Let's get into the details of the case. Read down on Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code that addressed unnatural offences criminalizing carnal intercourse between same sex adults in private. In 2009, the Delhi High Court termed Section 377 as unconstitutional in the Nas Foundation case. Later, the order was overruled by the Supreme Court in the Suresh Kumar Kaushal case. The petitioner, Navtej Singh Johar, filed a writ petition to a three-judge bench challenging the constitutionality of Section 377 and the previous order of the Supreme Court in the Suresh Kumar Kaushal case. Due to its high importance, the matter was then referred to a five-judge bench. The five-judge bench consisted of CJI Deepak Mishra, Justices D.Y. Chandrachud, Rohinton Nariman, Indu Malhotra, and A.M. Khanwilkar. The main issue being addressed here was challenging the constitutional validity of Section 377 that criminalized consensual same-sex acts and relationship between adults in private. It also challenged the previous Supreme Court order in Suresh Kumar Kaushal case and decided whether it was to be upheld or set aside. Here are the different arguments presented before the court. The petitioners Navtej Singh Johar, Aman Nath, Sunil Mehra, Aisha Kapoor, and Ritu Dalmia contended that homosexuality, bisexuality, and other sexual orientations were natural and based out of lawful consent and were not a physical or mental illness. The petitioners also contended that criminalizing sexual orientations violated the concept of individual dignity and decisional autonomy inherent to a person under the right to privacy of Article 21. The petitioners also sought recognition of right to sexuality, right to sexual autonomy, and right to choice a sexual partner under the right to life as part of Article 21. The petitioners submitted that the rights of the LGBT community that form about 7 to 8% of the Indian population were to be recognized and protected. They also relied on the Puttaswamy case that challenged the constitutionality of Section 377 that violated the right to privacy, violated choice of individual expression of sexual orientation, and also the right to privacy that lay at the core of the fundamental principles guaranteed under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Under Article 15, there was no right to discriminate based on sex that included both a biological and a psychological approach, as seen earlier in the Nalsa judgment. Under Article 19, there was no right to discriminate based on an individual's expression of gender. And under Article 14, there was protection that is guaranteed to men, women, and transgenders that was currently being curbed in Section 377. The respondents submitted that insofar the constitutionality of Section 377 was more concerned with the consensual acts of same-sex adults in private and left it to the wisdom of the court to decide. But there were interveners that wanted the retention of Section 377 as they felt it furthered a compelling state interest to reinforce morals into public life. Arguing that fundamental rights was not absolute, the interveners said that the Section 377 criminalized acts and not people and affected any kind of adults that engage in unnatural sexual conduct and affected both homosexual and heterosexual couples. The provisions of the Constitution that applied here were Article 14, Article 15, Article 19, and Article 21. The judgment in the case. In this landmark judgment of the Supreme Court, the five-judge bench termed Section 377 as unconstitutional and read down on Section 377 to the extent that it criminalized consensual sexual conduct between any two adults, whether same-sex or any others, in private. However, the court also clarified that consent had to be out of free will and not under any kind of duress or coercion. The Supreme Court also said that there has to be a distinction that is made of consent between consensual relationships of two adults in private, irrespective of whether it's homosexual or heterosexual in nature. They also further reiterated that a distinction has to be made between consensual relationships and other offenses under Section 377 like sodomy, bestiality, and non-consensual relationships. Further, the court analyzed the constitutionality of Section 377 on the bedrock of the principles enunciated that were Article 14, 15, 19, and 21. Under the Nalsa judgment, the court also referred to the fact that transgender persons were allowed equal rights under the law, and it is imperative for them to protect the rights of people of different gender identities and different sexual orientations. And also, under the Puttaswamy case, they recognized the interrelationship between privacy and autonomy, and how that comes under an integral part of the right to privacy under Article 21. The court concluded by saying that it's imperative for the right to privacy to include the right to sexual privacy and a need to protect sexual minorities. The court also referred to the Yogyakarta principles on sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as the UK's Wolforden Committee report in 1957, among many other international laws, as a case of reference and comparison before taking a certain decision. The court also relied on its judgment in Shakti Bahini vs. Union of India case and Shafin Jahan vs. Ashokan KM case that reaffirmed an individual's right to liberty and dignity under Article 19 and Article 21, and further also referred to the principles in Shaira Bano vs. Union of India case that irradiated against the LGBT community and was violative of Article 14 that penalized consensual sexual relationships between two adults in private. Interplay of morality and constitutionality, the court noted that a subjective notion of a public or societal morality that discriminates against LGBT persons, subjects them to criminal sanctions simply based on an innate characteristics, runs counter to the actual constitutional morality and cannot form the basis of a legitimate state interest. Further, the court reiterated that any restriction to the rights of LGBT persons must adhere to the requirements of legal existence of a legitimate state interest and proportionality. Further, one of the principles that emerged out of this judgment was intimacy between consenting adults of same sex is beyond the legitimate interest of the state. The court concluded that sexual orientation was natural, innate, and immutable, and the freedom of choice of an LGBT person to enter into a sexual relationship between another person of the same sex is an exercise of the person's choice and autonomy that is guaranteed to them under multiple articles in the Constitution. Further, the LGBT community forms part of a sexual minority that is protected under Part 3 of the Constitution. That's it for this case law. I hope that you learned something new. Thank you so much for listening.